Hello guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another stream. I promised you a ton of content this week ahead of the Champions League final, and I'm coming through with that. I'm trying not to freak out right now, but I'm freaking out just a little bit. I won't lie. I'm joined by Mike Ryan Ruiz. That's such a tongue twister.
I'm sorry.
He is the official voice of the Chelsea Mic'd Up podcast, and I'm just such a fan. So thank you so much for joining me.
I'm a massive fan of yours, Elizabeth, and everything that you do. I know I'm going to call you Ellie, Elizabeth, Liz. I'm just going to throw them all out there and cover all my bases. But I'm an immense fan of yours. I think you're one of the better Chelsea content creators out there, and Chelsea Football Club are blessed to have a great stable of content creators out here. And it seems as though everyone, for the most part, is trying to help each other out. And thank you for giving me a look here on your show in the biggest week of the men's football club.
Oh man, I'm absolutely pumped because I don't know about you, but I haven't supported Chelsea my entire life. I started supporting when I studied abroad in London in 2014. So I missed the first Champions League final. Wow. So this is my first Champions League final with Chelsea, and I'm super nervous just thinking about it. How are you feeling ahead of the game?
Well, a lot of 2012 vibes. I'm sure that's been the running theme on Chelsea Twitter for a long time. I was a Chelsea supporter, certainly for the 2012 final. This is one of the more peculiar Champions League finals I've ever really experienced as a soccer fan, and I've been hardcore passionate about club football since 2005. This is one of the more, in terms of what the sports books are saying, this is one of the more lopsided Champions League finals. A lot like 2012 kind of felt. I'm not even 100% convinced Chelsea are this really stellar team. If I'm running through the Chelsea teams of the 21st century, I'm struggling to put this one in top 10. Now, that could all certainly change with one brilliant and hopeful, amazing performance in the Champions League final where everyone's bad luck shifts all at once and we just have this ascension to the mean.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I feel like this Chelsea team still has so much in it. You know, it's a very young team. I still feel like they have a lot to learn. So it feels like such an accomplishment, maybe an over accomplishment. Like I definitely did not see us getting to a Champions League final. My prediction or what I wanted this season was let's try to get past the round of 16 because that's something that we've been struggling with for the past couple of years. But given the form, I feel like maybe people, including myself, kind of overhyped this Chelsea side a little bit when we went on that unbeaten run. And now we have 3 losses in our last 4 games. Does that make you any more nervous going into this final?
Yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth. It's not great. I do think that we were due for a humbler. That was a really intense level of drama and intensity in a very short amount of time that you can't. Yeah, I thought they might drop the Arsenal game just because it's hard to maintain that same level the entire time. But now we've gone outside of just a couple of humblers. This is a run of bad form. This is the poorest run of form Chelsea have had under Thomas Tuchel. And you hope that we've got enough there. Granted, fitness has been an issue. And I'm just really happy Conte and Mendy were at training today, and the fact that Christensen was available the last match. If I'm looking at the Thomas Tuchel era as a whole, my main takeaway is Chelsea have played their best football under Thomas Tuchel while Andreas Christensen has been out there. So for me, he is a massive key headed into this game.
Interesting. So who do you see? Because I feel like that back line is more or less tacked on, but then again, Christensen played so well that we even saw him make room for Azpilicueta and Azpilicueta go over to the right wing back role because Christensen was playing so well, but he hasn't played the past couple of games. So do you throw him into this Champions League final?
I have, yes, to answer your question briefly, I do. I have immense trust in him. I remember the book on Christensen was you couldn't trust him with the ball at his feet, and he worked so hard to the point that he's one of the more calming influences along that back line. You feel good when the ball's at his feet. I think he's worked incredibly hard. And I'll read into that sample, as small as it might be relative to the balance of the season. I think we're at our best with a back line, and we're most suited for success in this final in particular with a back line of the back three of Rudiger, Thiago Silva, Andreas Christensen, Chilwell on the left. And I'm a huge supporter of Reece James, but I'm going to lean on my captain here, his veteran savvy. He's been such a stellar player. If you wanted a hipster pick for player of the season, you might settle on Azpilicueta. And I can't believe he made the national team. How great is that?
I was so freaking pumped. I can't tell you, because I was looking up like months and months ago for the Spanish jersey, because my husband is Spanish. I live in Madrid. And I was like, oh, I really want to get Azpilicueta on the jersey, but I don't know if he's going to play in the national team. And that would just be weird. Yeah. And then he got called up. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy for him.
Yeah, I have a couple of Azpilicueta national team jerseys that I have in my closet, and I kind of feel bad because he barely featured for those teams. But if you look at their lineup, I mean, he might actually start on this team. I don't think they have someone to play along the right, and he's so versatile.
Right back. They don't.
At his age, at this stage in his career, he might actually get legitimate playing time for the national team. I couldn't be happier for him.
Oh, me too. Anybody who knows me knows that he's one of my absolute favorite players, like since I started supporting Chelsea. So I'm super happy to hear you say that. So very interesting take from you right off the bat. No Reece James in your starting 11, unless you're going to throw him into midfield, but I doubt that, right?
No, and it's a tough decision. I don't envy the one of Thomas Tuchel, because I think Reece is I mean, especially against City, I thought he was very good. He's put in some really good performances here as of late, but I think you honor your captain, you play the veteran game here, and you have a weapon like Reece should the game evolve and you find yourself in a different game. But I'm going to go with the horse that brought me, and I think that's Azpilicueta.
Awesome. So, yeah, it's really difficult because I always try to predict Thomas Tuchel's starting 11. I have gotten it right twice, I think, in all of the games that he's been in charge, which just tells you how much he changes it. So another talking point is that pivot. I felt that Jorginho and Kovacic didn't necessarily look very strong against Aston Villa. I don't know if that's due to rustiness. We know that Kovacic was out injured, so I'm kind of giving him a pass for those games because he was out for a month. I'm not expecting him to be 1,000% on it. And they did play a lot of games like back to back. But who starts in that pivot for you? I think even if a 50% Conte is fit, I would probably play N'Golo Kante in one of those positions. What about you?
Conte is starting. If Conte says he can go, I trust him, and we'll figure it out. And hopefully it's not a Diego Costa in the final type of situation where his body just gives up on him. I think he had an eye towards his final. He knows his body better than anybody. He had the foresight to predict an injury and not actually sustain it. So that was good. And I'm going to go with Jorginho alongside him. I thought Jorginho was absolutely brilliant defensively in the run-up to both the finals and the FA Cup and here in the Champions League. I thought he occupied the passing lanes against Manchester City brilliantly in that semifinal. I don't want to hear about rotation. That team started with KDB. You can't do that with Man City. They're always rotating. They wanted that game. And Jorginho, I thought, was absolutely brilliant. Had that midfield in his hip pocket the entire time. I trust him here in this final. I do think that you need, as we saw in 2012, and I just think we have such a young team in certain spots, especially in that attack. And that final, we've seen the pressure get to them in certain isolated moments. You're going to want as many cagey folks as you possibly can. And if the game does evolve and Chelsea are playing with a lead at some point, going over to bulls like Kovacic and Reece James to salt this game away, put a body on you, and keep possession, I think those are great options to have off the bench. Unfortunately, that's the issue with a team that makes it to the Champions League final, is you're going to have some really talented players not be able to crack that starting 11. But I think Jorginho's earned it based off of the performances he put in the run-up to this Champions League final.
Yeah, I think in most of the bigger games he has showed up. In some of the other games where I think Chelsea as a whole didn't play well, he had poor games, but so did many other players. The thing that worries me a little bit is that sometimes I feel like he will have an immense game, and then sometimes I feel like it's not great. But I think for a Champions League final, we're going to see all of these players like show up 1,000%, because that's something that kind of worries me a little bit. And I want to get your take on it. Like the fact that we can have this FA Cup final against Leicester and we're kind of like not playing that well, and then we play against them in the Premier League and we look like a completely different side. So do you think that that's down to fatigue, maybe like mentally, physically, just the number of games that the team has? What do you think?
Liz, everything that you're throwing out there is a great explanation for it. And also Chelsea are just weird. It's my hot take. They're a weird team. I think they've often displayed here, especially I think dating back to Maurizio Sarri, they tend to play to the level of their competition. There have been a couple of isolated incidents when they're not on a run of good form and they play a good team and they get absolutely blown off the pitch. And unfortunately, that's happened against Manchester City. That is not what I am expecting here. It's a cup final, which usually is not the most entertaining game. It's a cup final featuring domestic rivals. That is usually a very cagey affair, and that plays into this starting 11 that we're banning about. I think Jorginho excels in a cagey game, and he's played well against Manchester City for the most part. I'm going to trust Jorginho. I think I lean on leadership here, and when you look at the captaincy lineup in terms of you got Dave, then you got Jorginho, then you got Conte, and you got Mount. I want all my best leaders out on that pitch. I'm a little old school in that way.
1,000%. And so, sorry, there's like these birds that have been I don't know if you can hear them, but they're really annoying me. And they woke me up at like 7 a.m. and they're still going at it 13 hours later.
Birds? I mean, Elizabeth, typically like in cartoons, it's such a very pleasant thing to wake up to the sounds of birds chirping outside. But
It's not a chirp, it's like a squawk. I don't know, like it's terrible. But so hopefully you guys can't hear it over you, and I'll just like sit here like silently melting inside. But that brings us to the attack. You mentioned Mason Mount. I think we can both agree that he's definitely a nailed-on starter. So, but kind of the more interesting part is who do you start in that front two? Because I don't feel like any of the attackers have really differentiated themselves. They've all had some good games, some bad games, and I don't know who to go with. Who are you thinking? Who are you leaning towards?
I'm slowly but steadily being talked into what a weapon Christian Pulisic is off the bench. And I know you're not expecting that from an American, right?
I'm American too.
I'm not. I'm trying to balance what I think might be best for the club with what I want personally as an American. As I sip from my U.S. Soccer Cup, I would love to see an American starting in the Champions League men's final. That would be a huge achievement unlocked for U.S. men's soccer as they've lagged behind the women's team here. I just don't think that's the best course of action here. And I think this season's just been so weird. And Chelsea find themselves quite randomly in this Champions League final. I don't want to say randomly because that diminishes the massive achievement of getting here. But it's a weird year, and Chelsea are a weird finalist based off the balance of what we've seen in recent years, right? And if not now, when? I think several players are just due. You can't get any more unlucky than Timo Werner has been. Now, it's not always a question of luck, but I think he impacts a game. If Mason wasn't just so stellar this year, doing the hustle things, people would be talking about Timo as that kind of player. He just has this massive expectation of being a clinical finisher because he has in the past. But he does all the Mason Mount things in terms of getting in there, high press, max effort the entire time, setting up his teammates. He draws a load of penalties. If he can put it all together, God, it's been so unfair to the guy. A sleeve patch, you can't score with one of those. I go with Timo Werner in this spot. I think Kai Havertz also presents a dynamic that might match up well for this opponent in Manchester City. I just think if the game is going to be a little bit cagier from the onset, which is what everybody expects, then I think you want that Pulisic card in your back pocket because he can change the game off the bench going up against some tired legs for City.
No, definitely. I agree with you. And I think that Timo Werner, he hasn't had like this bad season that everybody's trying to make it out to be. Like, he does need to stay on side more, because we've seen that he can score goals, but he's just sometimes a hair offside, and it's so frustrating. That's like a whole other discussion, because sometimes I feel like it's not even worth looking at that offside, but whatever, that's for another day. But I really hope that Timo Werner scores, because he's due a goal, and he's put the ball in the back of the net so many times, or off the crossbar. And I think that he could pair up well with Kai Havertz. They have this German connection going. Kai Havertz can also get into tight spaces. He's also very fast and pacey. And then the other thing I was thinking was perhaps you even see Ziyech starting, because he's like a more senior player. He has more experience. He played in a Champions League semifinal, and he's been showing up in the bigger games. I don't think he's necessarily had like amazing games when he's played, but he's had these crucial moments that have changed the game. So he could be another option as well. Like, I just don't know. I do think it's going to be Timo and Kai Havertz, like you said, and then it's amazing to bring Pulisic and Ziyech off the bench. But anything can happen. We never know with Thomas Tuchel. And we have an interesting question from Ali that I wanted to ask you. She says, is Pulisic better off the bench, or if he's better if he's not on the pitch with Timo Werner? And I thought this was interesting, because I feel like a lot of the times they occupy very similar spaces. So maybe that's why she's saying he's better if Timo isn't on the pitch. What do you think?
It's a great question, and more needs to be explored with that Timo stuff. I think we all had Timo pegged as our, classic striker up top, and we had talented wing players that could do their things, and the season evolved to the point that now you have to play Kai in that false nine, because that's the only place that you've gotten anything out of him there, and Timo's this versatile player. I didn't necessarily think that Timo and Christian Pulisic would be in a direct positional battle, certainly not when we made that signing. I think Christian Pulisic is a tremendous player. I think he has a special quality that Chelsea need. I think a lot of people held him being dispossessed under Frank a little too harshly against him, because for a large stretch of time, while he was struggling putting the ball in the net, no doubt, he was the only person really displaying that intensity and that will to actually get in the box and make something out of nothing. When you look at our roster, Timo and Christian are the best too at making something out of nothing. Mason's really come on as of late too with his dribbling and playmaking ability. But I think in terms of dribbling through traffic, having your speed present a problem for the opposing team, Christian's honestly as good a weapon as we have on the team. I like to see him as a regular starter. I'm an American. I wear my bias on my sleeve. But,
me too. I love this guy so much.
But for this game, you got a one-game sample here. You gotta take into account your opponent. And I just think, while it may hurt some feelings here in the States, I think the best possible look for this individual game and this one-game sample is bringing that speed demon off the bench and changing the game. I really do.
Yeah, I think City have a very big squad as well, and they're going to be able to pull, like, any of their bench could be starters, and Chelsea are kind of in that situation as well, I think. So it's going to be interesting, and who better to influence a game than Christian Pulisic, because I think that, like, running at those defenders who might have tired legs could be essential to this game. I don't know. So
yeah, I would go early. I would go to him early too, because his speed, look, he's played well against Manchester City. You have defenders on Manchester City that openly tell you that is the most difficult marking assignment that I've had here in the Premier League. Most people think this is going to be really ugly, and that a player that relies on his speed like Christian Pulisic might not even get many opportunities to get going here in the early on. So save those legs. And I wouldn't hesitate to put him on at halftime. I really wouldn't. I think he can change the game. And I think it's such a weapon off the bench. I really do.
Yeah, Me too. I think like this season he never really like got started, but I'm hoping next season he's not going to struggle with injuries so much, and hopefully he can have a starting out and out position, because I do think like when he's on it, he's one of the best players at Chelsea, and even post restart last season, I thought he was one of the best players in the Premier League. So we're both massive Christian Pulisic fans, you guys. There's no hiding it there. You mentioned that you think the game is going to be really cagey to start off with. I don't love that we're playing somebody in England. I wish that we were playing a PSG or something, just so it's a little bit. I would feel less nervous if we were playing PSG, just because we haven't really, well, we've played them quite a few times recently, but not super recently. What do you think is going to be the key for this Chelsea side? Because City, I feel like they're going to come out all guns blazing, trying to get an early goal.
I think Chelsea are really great at limiting chances, right? That's when they've been playing their best soccer, and they've been really wasteful. They've been actually pretty decent at generating chances, but they've been super wasteful with those chances. And it always feels like we run into a team that's the most efficient with their chances. And when you look at the quality, it's so unlucky because we suffocate them. We give them 2 chances, they score on 2. Yet we generate 8 chances and we're offside on half of them. It's very frustrating to me. So oftentimes Chelsea have, instead of people crediting Chelsea, people go, well, Real Madrid offered nothing. Manchester City offered nothing. Atletico Madrid offered nothing. Perhaps they're offering nothing because Chelsea are making them.
Exactly.
Right? And I think we have to toe that line. That's our identity. We have to be tough. I'm not saying get an early yellow to set the tone. I think we have to be really disciplined. I'm a little nervous playing out the back, but that's why I want to start Christensen out there. I think he can be, despite his one high-profile moment in the Champions League and bad distribution, he's really done a 180 since then. So I think not making the big mistake, because we're just the kind of team that if we make a mistake, we cannot survive it. Avoid the big mistake, drag them out into the deep water. I think Manchester City are not just playing Chelsea Football Club on Saturday. Manchester City enter this game with the world on their shoulders. This is a failure for Pep Guardiola if he doesn't win this trophy. Believe it or not, a team that's won a double, but they've won those trophies under Pep Guardiola. This is one that's alluded to him here at Manchester City. They've got more pressure. Chelsea are somehow the ragtag underdog, if you can believe that. So I think Chelsea got to use that to their advantage. Keep this game close as long as possible, because Manchester City are going to start seeing ghosts.
Yeah, really well said. I'm nervous about that back passing. Like I feel like in recent games, we have seen more and more mistakes because teams will press us and we will lose possession in very dangerous areas. So that's something that we definitely need to watch out for. And like you said, be clinical. I say this in every single one of my match previews, and I don't know why Chelsea aren't scoring that many goals when we're creating so many chances, but I don't know how to improve that. I don't know if it's just shooting drills or like staying on sides. Like I don't know, because there's only so much that you can do. You're creating the chances, so then it's on the players to finish those chances. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think what we're seeing right now, maybe on training grounds of academies, they're teaching onside runs totally different here in the VAR age. For Timo, I think what we're seeing is just the fruits of a player that's trained one way for his entire career, and now the science says you can't exactly cheat the way off a player's back shoulder as much as you used to. And it's a shame Timo relies on timing so much, because he's got incredible straight line pace. I would say we probably need to be there. I think Timo has only really done one thing one way. And in the VAR age, especially in the Premier League, how they execute VAR, it's different than other leagues. It's not great. I think you and I both agree we're not fans of it. He has to reshape himself a little bit here, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's probably going to take some time for him. Like, this season is a massive learning curve for him and Kai, and even Ziyech, who I thought would cut. He was the player that I said he's going to come in and make the biggest difference in this side. And he really has been not even starting or playing in many of Chelsea's games, especially under Tuchel. So, I think that it just speaks to how difficult the Premier League is as a league, and that it's going to take these players times to get used to it and to learn how they can operate and how they can get better in the side. So kind of with all of that in mind, who do you think is going to be the key player for Chelsea in this game? If you had to pick one.
Wow. N'Golo Kante. I think if N'Golo Kante is fit, that's a huge problem. I think when healthy, N'Golo Kante is our best player. And he has that special quality to erase several players in that midfield. I think I'm a big believer in superstars got to play like superstars when it's superstar time. Big time players make big time plays in big games. Shout out to Santana Moss of the University of Miami, who coined that phrase. And I'm going to go with my best player here. And if I'm giving you like a hipster pick on who the key is, I'll go with Christensen, because I think we play our best ball when he's excelling.
Interesting. Yeah, so you stole mine. I was going to say N'Golo Kante, and I feel like we've kind of been seeing what an impact he can have through his absence in these past couple of games. I feel like we have struggled a bit without him. And I just think he's so important to break up the play and sniff out the danger before it really happens, to protect the back line. And I feel like his forward passing, and not even his passing, but just like driving the ball from the midfield to the attack, has been super underrated recently. Like, I feel like it's a skill that he has improved massively, and we're seeing him more involved in like the pre-assist or whatever you want to call it. So I think that he's absolutely massive. He's like two players, but even if he's 50%, that's one player. Then, he's just that freaking good. But if I had to pick someone different, I'll probably go for Mason. He's integral to Chelsea's attack as well. I think like his press, his energy, his leadership, like he bleeds blue, and he's going to be fighting for this team. So I think that he could be really important. If he has a good game, it could be integral to this Chelsea side as well. Quick said, is Elizabeth from the UK or not? No, we're both from the US, actually, which is super cool. I don't get many Americans on here, so I'm really excited about that. So if you had to predict like how you think this game is going to go down, what do you think? How is it going to end?
Do you want the Homer prediction, or I do tend to think this is tough, because Manchester City are favorites. I think they're minus 290 to lift the cup. Like I said, this is the biggest to lift the cup favorite since 2012.
I really hope they don't do it.
I got a funny feeling that Chelsea's luck is bound to turn. I really do. They gotta be perfect. I think this is tied after 90 minutes. And if we're going off of this season as an indicator, say we get to PKs, Manchester City have struggled there. However,
it's true.
They've really struggled there. I mean, they've tried so many different options at that penalty spot. They'll be inside they've struggled so much they'll be inside their own heads. Now, Mendy's dealing with bruised ribs. Go ahead. No, you got something here. You go. Don't hold your excitement.
Oh my God. That is such a great point that I hadn't thought of before. So if we can hold Man City to a tie after 90 minutes, after extra overtime, obviously I would love for us to wrap up this game in 90 minutes and be done with it. But if that can't happen, that's a great point that Man City have been changing their penalty takers so much that they said Ederson is their best penalty taker. So
it's
that could be a massive advantage for us. That could be a big advantage.
Look, they missed one. Aguero missed one against Mendy. Yeah. He was going to do the thing. I am a little worried, not just because of Mendy's injury, which is obviously a concern here. Mendy, on every PK he's faced outside of one, just does the same move. He just falls down on the ground to the right. And I feel like everyone is on to that move. Everyone. So I'd be nervous, not just because of what he's shown in a Chelsea shirt in PKs, which is obviously not an advantageous for the goalkeeper to be in anyway. But he seems as though he really leans on one. That kick that Aguero took against him was so bad that he started diving to his right and realized he could just get up and catch it. But Man City, not only do they have the pressure of this is a trophy that's eluded us while Pep's been here, this is a Champions League final, and there's already enough pressure in there. They also have a large sample over the course of this season of them really struggling and not even knowing who's going to be taking their PK. So if it gets there, I fancy Chelsea in that spot.
That's a fantastic point. So let's see. I do feel like Chelsea are the underdogs. Maybe it takes a little bit of pressure off, but I'm still going to be super freaking nervous on the game. I'm trying to like not hype myself up and just be like, it's okay, whatever happens, it's an achievement just to get to the final. But I obviously I want to win, and I'm still feeling extremely nervous for this game. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions about Chelsea's season before we move on. So like, what were your expectations going into the season? Did you see us getting to a Champions League final?
Certainly not a Champions League final. I thought Chelsea wouldn't win the league, but I thought that they could close the gap on Liverpool. I just didn't see Liverpool falling off as much as they did. Chelsea did considerably close a gap. They just finished right off of Liverpool there. Shout out to Liverpool for turning their fortunes around, because that was a very strong close to their season. But if you would have sat me down, Elizabeth, let me ask you this, because I did this on Chelsea Mic'd Up with Chris Winningham. Your leading goal scorer in the Premier League has 7 goals. Yeah. And Jorginho's among your leaders, right? You're getting 1 more point than you had the previous Premier League season. There would be a managerial change, and you'd be 9th at the time of the managerial change. How on earth can I not just be absolutely elated that we punched our ticket to next year's Champions League and we found ourselves in 2 finals?
Yes, thank you.
I know if we lose this, we're going to start getting a reputation, a bottle reputation perhaps in some of these cup finals. We got to start winning some of these cup finals. But now that top 4 is solidified, this is a miracle season that Chelsea have given me on the men's and women's side. This has been a hell of a thrill ride. I'll be devastated. I'll be crushed. But that is one heck of a way to pacify yourself. When you consider all the adversity that Chelsea had this year, you wouldn't give any of their signings in the attack an A+ signing. I think you'd be hard-pressed to give some of these signings a B+ in the attack, quite frankly. They have not a single one of these signings has panned out the way that we'd hope, at least in the attack. Mendy has been a sterling signing by all accounts. But when Timo's struggling the way that he did, when Kai, I know he had COVID, when he's struggling the way that he did, the fact that you're even here without seeing anything close to the best out of those players, an incredible achievement to get here. And it actually gets you excited for the following year. Yeah.
No, I'm so glad that you said that, because I tend to take a more like rational approach to this, because obviously like I want Chelsea to win trophies, but I understood like you're signing 200 million worth of players. Yes, but you need to give these players time to adapt, and you're changing like 6 positions in the team. So it's not going to click right away. And like they need time to adapt to the Premier League, to a new position, to teammates, to a new country with all the COVID restrictions as well. Like it must have been so difficult. So I think given where we were in January, it's massive to see. I would never have thought that we would get to a Champions League final. Like that's absolutely insane. And I think like with another season with the team, Thomas Tuchel can really put his footprint, it's saying like make his mark on this side, and he's doing it already.
Fingerprints.
Imprint, yeah.
You had the wrong.
I'm getting confused. Yeah. So if you had to give a letter grade, somebody told me that this is super American letter grades. I had no idea. If you had to give a letter grade to this season as a whole, what would you give it?
This season as a whole, well, as a whole, I bring in the women's team. This season has been an A+. And some people might say, well, how could you give it an A+? We haven't won a trophy on the men's side. The signings didn't pan out. I say that's exactly the reason why I'm giving it an A+, because we overcame all of that. And here we are playing the last club game of the season, the biggest club football game on the planet. And you and I are still trying to figure out if Chelsea are a good team or not. That's nuts. That's nuts. There have been so many great Chelsea teams in the 21st century, so many deserving of lifting the big ears. And so many of those teams didn't get this far to the final. They didn't get to this particular moment.
Yeah.
I'm not taking it for granted. This is, at certain points in the year, I was worried if I'd even be in this as recently as Sunday, I didn't know if I would even be in the competition next year. We're in the final. We beat Real Madrid to get into the final. Are you kidding me? This is incredible. A+ across the board.
I love your positivity, honestly. I'd give it an A. I don't think I go A+, but I freaking love it. Like, men and women's team in a Champions League final. That's insane. That's just insane.
Yeah, so, the women, we had one of the greatest women's team of all time.
Oh, yeah. I'm super excited to see what they're doing next season, and I hope that they can win it. That Barcelona side was just I looked at their goal difference, and it was like over 130 or something.
Yeah, it was 128-5. And when we were doing the preview episode on Chelsea Mic'd Up, I thought Chris Whittingham, my co-host, was lying to me because that seems made up. And it turns out Barcelona are actually that good. So some ground to make up, but still that doesn't take away from the fact that they amassed several trophies, that won the league. The Community Shield kind of felt like an old school American Championship final to settle who last year's real champion was. So yeah, incredible team to watch. They need a little bit more pace though, because Barcelona were so overwhelming.
They were. And when they scored within like 30 seconds or whatever it was, I was like, damn it. But hopefully, like Emma Hayes said, there's nothing to be sad about because they're the second best team in Europe in this year. And then hopefully they can build off of this. Barcelona had a massive whooping, I think, a couple of years ago, and they came back and look where they are now. So I'm sure that this Chelsea side is going to get there. So kind of talking about, you said it was an A+ season, but maybe if we had a new signing or two, we could make it even better next season.
Oh, wait, are we gonna play the game? Haaland, Kane, or Lukaku? Are we playing that game?
I wasn't planning on it, but we can play it if you want.
No, I was just every interview that I've done so far this week, I'm playing the game Kane, Lukaku, or Haaland. I love it.
Well, I 2 out of the 3 I don't think are very feasible. So I think we're really left with one player, but we can play if you want.
With the news today on Antonio Conte, I think Lukaku is the most likely now.
Yeah. I think unless he follows Conte to wherever he goes.
Why does NK keep asking if you have a crush on any footballer? I want that question because it's Olivier Giroud. I'll answer your question, NK. It's Olivier Giroud. I've been in public about my crush. I got this, Liz. Eliminate. Do you have a crush on any footballer? Yes, Olivier Giroud.
Thank you for answering.
In perpetuity throughout the universe. Everyone should have a crush.
I think everybody does. I think he just has the most perfect hair that a footballer could ever have, honestly. Yeah. So
that's a sore subject because he made fun of my hair once, but
I heard that. Yeah. I heard that on your podcast.
Yeah, I brought a knife to a gunfight that day.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. At least you can say, like, that's so cool to say, hey, Olivier Giroud made fun of my hair.
I'll tell you, he is such a class individual. He was so kind, so funny. He made fun of my hair, and then he sent me a jersey. Jersey. The guy's a real class individual. It's a kind of a bummer for me that he's not playing in this game. If we were doing like Mike's Homer 11, it would look a little different than what we should put out there, because I've got Olivier Giroud starting up top. That guy is one of the nicest people I've encountered in the sport.
Oh my god, he sounds incredible. I wish I could talk to him. I really feel for him because I want to see him play with Chelsea one more time before he leaves, I think inevitably this summer. But he's been such a great signing for Chelsea, and he's been so important. So that kind of, we didn't really answer the question. I think both of us pretty much think Lukaku is probably the most likely. I don't think Kane is likely.
I think Harry Kane's impossible. I rate the player. I think he's a tremendous player. We obviously are struggling in clinicality. He provides loads of it. For me personally, I rate Haaland. I think his ceiling is better than even the best of Harry Kane. I understand the questions of bringing in yet another Sterling goal scorer from the Bundesliga, because I have all sorts of questions about their defensive tenacity over there, given what we've seen. But I think Haaland is just really a generational type player, and he proved it. Are we shifting from Messi Ronaldo to Mbappe Haaland?
Yeah, exactly. So, guys, I think that those two players are like Kane, probably impossible. Haaland seems that he's probably staying at Dortmund for another season. We don't know, but most likely right now, I think it's Lukaku, which would still be awesome. So we kind of talked a little bit about Olivier Giroud, but I do want to ask you about your career and your interviews in some time before we finish up. So could you just tell everybody what you do, what's your day-to-day like, and how you got started, how you got into it?
Well, it's funny because people who know me just from like being a Chelsea account or Chelsea content creator don't know that in the United States, I'm a part of the biggest sports show podcast in the country with the Dan Le Batard show with Sue Gotts, which was on ESPN. And now we just signed this big lucrative deal with DraftKings. But that's how I got a blue check, right? I was an ESPN employee, and now I'm still with the show. Chris Whittingham, my co-host on Chelsea Mic'd Up, we hired him. He's a part of the show just because I can't do anything without that great kid. But we were actually in London. Chris and I and a friend, we've taken 2 trips over to the UK for all the festive fixtures. It was a great time. And we were actually in London, in town, to watch Chelsea when Chelsea signed Christian Pulisic. So the Chelsea account reached out and said, hey, can we get an American reaction from London the day that we signed Pulisic? So I did a video. It apparently did pretty well, and the club were happy with it. And we just started having conversations of, hey, we've been thinking about doing some content as a club with a bit of an American tinge to it, especially now that we've got Christian. It makes sense. And yeah, when your favorite club wants to work with you, you jump at the chance. And we're now ending our 2nd season of Chelsea Mic'd Up, which is a podcast. It's the only official club podcast, and we get loads of player interviews on the podcast, and it's really just an absolute dream job. I've done Zooms with Olivier Giroud, Ashley Cole, Petr Cech, Christian Pulisic. I think I've interviewed Christian Pulisic more than anybody else in the country. It's been a crazy, insane thrill ride, and yeah, it's the chance of a lifetime. I had to jump at it.
That's insane. Just putting out there, I'm American. I'm American too. In case you're looking for another American to join the team, but what's it like interviewing these players? Like, do you get nervous? How do you prepare for these interviews? Like, I don't know if I'd be able to think straight. I would be so nervous in front of them.
I actually don't really get nervous. There was one time that I got nervous just because I felt like a lot was riding on it. It was really important when we flew out to Cobham, and that day we interviewed Jorginho, but it was like really built around, it was our first interview with Christian Pulisic on the podcast, and there was a real heavy promotional push around that. And Christian, it's not the easiest thing to get a lot out of Christian and really show a personable side and give an interview that has some substance to it and give some insight into some sort of personality. So we really prepared for that interview to the point that we got in our own heads. And then once we sat down, like you realize it's just a young kid and you can level with him about American things. And so that's the only time. Yeah, that's the only time I really got in my own head. But generally everybody that I've spoken with at Chelsea have been really great and accommodating. And I kind of approach it differently. Because look, I'm not this hard-hitting investigative journalist. My job on Chelsea Mic'd Up is I don't come in there with like fully formed opinions on players. I just want to spotlight personality and be a conduit for the Chelsea supporter to these people, because what we have is direct access. There's so many great places in the Chelsea content sphere where you can get tactical breakdowns. I mean, your video is legendary on the pivot, on the midfield pivot. I'm still stealing my takes from that video. There are so many great content creators that get nuts and bolts, football tactics. Me, I veer more towards the personalities that I want to highlight. And I think especially on the women's side this season, I'm really proud of what the podcast was able to achieve in letting Chelsea supporters worldwide get to know some of these players, because it's a very one-dimensional thing that we see on our television screens, and these people have feelings. And when Timo Werner came on and spoke so honestly about his struggles this season, you start feeling for the player and you end up rooting for them even more than just because they're wearing the badge. So that's what I'm most proud of. What the podcast does here is really open the window to, hey, they're people too. They have feelings. They see it all, and maybe if you can walk a mile in their shoes, or at least hear them describe what it's like, you'll come away thinking differently.
That's amazing. I really love that, because I've been saying, especially with the likes of Timo and Kai, like they are so young and moving to a new country must be so difficult. Like I can completely understand why they might be struggling on the pitch as well. I moved to a new country and I cried every day for months because it's tough. It sucks at first. So
no mention you can't even go out to a bar or meet with friends because you're locked in your home. I think it's vastly understated how difficult it's so difficult to move leagues and move to a new country, as you just highlighted, to do it under these conditions
and in the spotlight.
It's amazing. Timo's been as good as he has been, quite honestly. That's not a take that you're hearing right now in Chelsea Twitter, but credit to the player for overcoming all those things.
1,000%. And do you prepare for the interviews the same way, or do you prepare? Is there anything that you change maybe based off of the player? What's your process like?
My process is I really don't like to be overly prepared for these, because then I feel like I'm coming at an interview with an agenda, right? And I really like to take the certain flow of the interview and have it be organic and be able to call audibles if I have someone that's a little bit more engaging. I have like a basic set of questions I think I want to ask, and I'll just lean more into tactics if a player's not necessarily opening up for whatever reason. But I really take every interview. Oftentimes I'm meeting these people for the very first time. So I genuinely am curious. Hey, I do like a little pre-interview talk with them. Like, what do you like? I let them get insights in my personality, and just let them know that this is a calm, relaxed place. I'm not out to get you. I'm not going to hold you out over the fire here. I just want to have fun. And they tend to really respond there. Obviously, when we have Fikayo Tomori on and he tells the club that he doesn't want to go on loan and he wants to stay, like, we have to ask some of the news, some of the traditional journalist questions, because sometimes it's so obvious that you can't avoid it. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, like, we didn't do a pre-interview, really. I know you sent me some stuff that you wanted to get into. I didn't really look at it all that much, because I just want to ride by the seat of my pants a little bit. That's kind of my style.
Yeah, no, definitely. I usually just try to go with it. I have user questions, but sometimes it's like just good to have a list of things just in case. We have a question from Ali, which I really like, because I love Billy Gilmour's accent, but I'm not gonna lie, I need subtitles because I don't understand the Scottish accent at all.
Yeah. One of my favorite interviews that we did on Chelsea Mic'd Up was with Billy Gilmour, and it was kind of at the start of the shutdown, and you realize that he's in his childhood room, and you're talking to a teenager. I loved my time with Billy Gilmour. We probably went for 35 minutes with Billy Gilmour. He was so gracious with his time. Yeah, please search out the podcast Chelsea Mic'd Up and go into our archives, because it's a pretty evergreen interview with Billy Gilmour. We talk about his life leading up to getting that call up to the first team, and just the family. What's it like to actually, like, you need a ride from your dad to go to places? Like, we talked about all that stuff. So yeah, Billy Gilmour was an absolute pleasure. And if I were picking Mike's Homer 11 players that I just feel connected to based off of who's been a good interview and who's just a kind soul that I root for, Billy Gilmour would be my starting 11.
I love it. I think he could be up to it as well. I think he's that good. I wish that he played more, but I really want to see more of him next season.
I think he's so often, as you outlined in your pivot video, which is, like I said, legendary. I think we had so many mishmashed skill sets, right? You had the dribbling skill of Kovacic. You had the defensive marking of Conte. You had the penalty spot and distribution specialty of Jorginho. You were lacking pace. Some players had pace, some players didn't. And we kept looking for the right answers in that midfield. And to me, the player that molds all of those skills really is Billy Gilmore. If he could find a way to put it together, and I think the Euros are going to be great for the player's development, I truly think he's got an immensely high ceiling, a ceiling that's outside of Conte because he's a different level, a ceiling that's higher than anybody else that we presently have in our midfield.
Chills. I got chills right now because I freaking love that. So if you had to give like your top 3 players to interview, I'm just curious, who's your favorite to interview?
Okay, so past and present?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, so on Chelsea Mic'd Up, we've interviewed loads. My favorite interview that I ever did was probably Olivier Giroud because I didn't expect to be dunked on in that fashion by such a kind man. My first interview ever was tremendous. It was in person, and I have a great story around that. Is I got to do some events with Ashley Cole, who generally I've read like the media was kind of hard on him, the tabloids over there in the UK. So I've read that Ashley and the media don't exactly get on. But like I said, I'm not really a member of the media. I'm just here to have a good time. And he was very relaxed with me, and he gave me an amazing interview for our very first episode. And we were watching the game against Burnley. We had an event in Austin that I was there on behalf of the club with Ashley there. And we were watching. That was a game that Pulisic scored his perfect hat trick. And this was deep in the heart of Texas. Like everybody was losing their minds. And I know some of the people over at City that work with their promotional team here in the States. So I was actually being introduced to Sean Wright-Phillips. And like we were talking and we were getting along, and Pulisic scored the first one, and I just kind of like big time Sean Wright-Phillips leaned over him, and Ashley Cole and I were high-fiving. It was just it's a football memory that I will always cherish. So Ashley Cole is in my top 3. I gave Billy Gilmore his shout out, so I won't put him in my top 3 because I already addressed how great he is. He'd be my 4th place, but Petr Cech gave us an incredible interview, and he really detailed, and that's also available in our archive. He detailed in amazing fashion just his mind when he saved that penalty kick in the Champions League final. It was just a goosebump-inducing story. Ashley's story was also pretty good about his penalty kick.
Oh my God. Guys, well, now you know you have to go back and listen to these episodes in Chelsea Mic'd Up. That's insane. I think I have this perception that Petr Cech is just like one of the smartest humans alive because he speaks so many languages and he just carries himself so well. So one final question for you before we go. If you had any advice to somebody trying to get into media or journalism, or the sports industry, what would it be?
Well, journalism's changed when I first got into it because it was just being tenacious, but being tenacious and you were at the mercy of others. Like, I just want a microphone. I emailed for a radio station internship. I started when I was 19 years old. I'm in my mid 30s right now, but this is now the culmination of me scratching for 10 years to try to get in the door. This is a blessed time to get into content creation because now you don't need anybody to give you a microphone. You've got a microphone on your computer. So I wouldn't ask me in 2021 how I got here because I have a very traditional way of getting here. My path is traditional American mainstream media. Elizabeth is the future. Elizabeth isn't even the future. She's the present. What she's doing right now is how you get noticed. That's how she got on my radar. So I would ask Elizabeth what she's doing because she's doing great work right now.
Oh, thanks so much. I try to keep it together. Thank you. Honestly, it means the world.
No, thank you for all the, like I said, I really appreciate your tact. You're not a hot taker, like they call it here in the States. You're not putting anybody down to lift yourself up. And I think we need more of that.
Oh, thank you. Well, Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure, to say the least, having you on my channel. Thank you so much for taking the time. Just let everybody know where they can find you. I put your Twitter handle in the description below, but just in case we haven't said it enough about where they can find you.
I'm not one of those quote unquote like big accounts. I tweet about a lot of things. I mean, you're not only going to get Chelsea opinions on @Michael Ryan Ruiz on Twitter. You're going to get a lot of random Florida Panther GIFs and Heat thoughts and Miami Hurricane stuff. like I said, I do a sports show here in the United States, so I throw a wide net. But for Chelsea match days, you know exactly what you're getting with me, at Michael Ryan Ruiz. Please search out on your favorite podcast platform of choice, Chelsea Mic'd Up. Like I told you, a lot of the interviews are really evergreen. We put all the names of the guests in the title so you can scan for your favorite ones. I implore you to listen to the ones with Timo, Ashley, Petter, Billy. Like, we talked to Pulisic a bunch, Reece James, Tammy, Emma Hayes. List goes on and on. It's been an absolute thrill ride.
Wow, guys, so make sure you check out his podcast. Make sure you listen. Mike, thank you so much again for joining me. I appreciate it so much. Guys, lead up to the Champions League final. It's absolutely insane. I'm nervous and excited at all of the emotions, but thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'm out.